two things, and you can pick which way you want to go with it because they kind of played off each other. Yesterday, Atkinson was asked, did you like the move of DeAndre Hunter and Koby being aggressive to get him? And I thought his answer was brilliant. It's like, yeah, I love being part of a team that's aggressive, knowing it wants to win. And we love George and Karras, but we thought Hunter was an upgrade, so we went out and did it. And then two, he's not shy about throwing some different defensive coverages and trying some things in the regular season that some coaches may just be holding back until the playoffs. Let's do these both real quick. Pick whichever one you want to start with. But what do you make of Kenny's comments on both those two topics?
Start with the defense because I asked him about it. And the reason, and I was surprised he said it, but he said, like, last year they were very sort of bland defensively, and they were. And I would even go back to, again, when I was on the beat and when Ty was here, Ty was very vanilla during the regular season. He never wanted to show anything. And I remember it was actually a game at Atlanta late in the year, and the Cavs didn't show anything, didn't do anything. Atlanta blew their doors off. This might have been the year they won the championship. And everyone was like, oh my God, they're never going to beat the Hawks. And LeBron was like, guys, we're fine. Everything's fine. And the reason they knew they were fine was because they knew they were going to start blitzing pick and rolls and just throwing everything at the Hawks in the postseason that they didn't show them in the regular season. And they were right. Kenny's gone the other way with this, and he talked about it last night. You can throw zone at him, throw box and one at him, blitz him on pick and rolls. And it's a little odd to me that a coach is so open with all of this stuff. And his point was like, hey, we got to see it. We got to see it live. And he's right. But guys are always drilling this stuff in practice. And then, they'll go 5-on-5 or whatever, and they'll show it against each other and then unleash it in the playoffs. In Minnesota, I mean, last night's not a great example. It's a Western Conference team. You're not going to see them to the finals, and I don't think anybody's picking the Wolves to make the finals, although you never know. And is such a good scorer. It's sort of a nice test case. Okay, here's this guy. Kenny mentioned he's really well rested. He's going to come in here looking to get his, and so just throw everything you can at him and see what it looks like. Kenny's a first-year coach. Yeah, we're at the All-Star break, but he's still getting to know these guys, and he's still understanding tendencies and what guys are good at and what they're not. And the only way to really see it is to see it in live action. So I kind of enjoy it. I like that he mixes it up, that he's not afraid to put something on film that may come back to haunt him later. You're showing trust in your guys that ours are better than yours. And it doesn't matter if you know what we're going to do. We're going to do it, and we're still going to be successful with it. So it's fascinating. You and I have talked about it earlier, more on the offensive end than the defensive end. We've had this conversation about, like, he'll just throw things out there and see what it looks like. And I love that because I wish that's the one thing I wanted to see more of the last couple of years that we never really saw. And now he's even doing it on the defensive end.
So all of my basketball principles come from Jim O'Brien, who I played for at Emerson College. He coached at Ohio State.
I covered him at Ohio State.
Yeah, that was my coach in college. It was the best advantage I could have ever had as a D3 player. I wasn't very good, but I think part of the reason I understand basketball as well as I do now is I sat next to him on the bench for quite a while for my first 3 years and got a firsthand recollection of what he's going through. And the one thing OB used to preach was no matter how much you practice something, the game is different.
Yeah.
Nothing we do in practice emulates a real game. We would drill last second situations. You're down 3, 10 seconds. We'd go through that every practice and all these different, and we get in the game and we mess it up. And it's because in those situations, Jason, there is nothing that you can do prep-wise beforehand that gets you in the mental state. I could run through our out-of-bounds plays to this day blindfolded. But with 3 seconds left and we need a bucket off that, it's a whole different story.
Yep.
And I say that to say I love what Kenny Atkinson is doing because, A, let's be honest, Jason Tatum's seen every pick and roll coverage in the book. There's nothing you're going to throw at Jason Tatum or Banchero or any of the best players in the Eastern Conference or SGA in the finals if they get there that they haven't seen before. It's all about the element of surprise. And do you know what takes them more by the element of surprise than just throwing a blitz at them or a trap or changing up the coverage? Is doing it at a high level, Jason. If you throw a trap at SGA and it's a crappy trap, guess what he's going to do? He's going to torch it, and you're going to get burned on the backside. But if you have the element of surprise and you do it well, then what you practiced in the game or in practice it works. And it's only going to work for a possession or two. All these guys are so smart. They'll figure it out. They'll change. But it's just that little curveball. It's that ephus just to keep the hitter completely off balance that you have in your back pocket that you could deploy at any given moment. And you won't know for sure what you believe in as a coach and what your team can execute at the level you need them to, unless you test it out in real game situations. And I thought last night with DeAndre Hunter, the fact that Kenny Atkinson was willing to test new stuff out with DeAndre in the game, who is just learning the basics, why not? And it's a long way of saying I love what Kenny Atkinson is doing, and I understand practice. They practice it. That is cool. But Jason, we could go over how to punch up a show for UCSS, and I could teach you how to direct when it's just me and you on a Saturday, and then you get in there when 11 o'clock hits on a Monday, and we got a big guest coming up. Those buttons are going to look a lot different. So I love the fact that they're willing to actually try this stuff in a game. And as Kenny pointed out, it helps when you're up 20 or up 30 or up 40 at some points. I don't think they ever got to 40 last night, but when you're up big and you could sacrifice a possession or two. But I'm all in favor of them trying different stuff offensively, defensively, lineups, 2-man pairings, 3-man pairings. Because in the playoffs, you can't test anymore. In the playoffs, you got to know what works and what doesn't. And this is the perfect runway, especially when you're, what's the record? 42-9, 42-10, whatever the record is. Like, this is the time to test it out. So kudos to Kenny, because a lot of coaches are scared to fail. I don't think Kenny's scared to fail. I think he's willing to learn what works and what doesn't.
What you can't have, and this happened, I think, last year and the year before. I don't remember if this happened last year or not. I know it happened 2 years ago against the Knicks. You can't put a 5-man, and again, I'm going to go back to the offensive side. You can't put a 5-man lineup out there unless it's extreme circumstances that hasn't played together during the regular season.
No.
And that happened in the Knicks series. And you can't do that. That's inexcusable. And I can't remember if it happened against Orlando or not. But there should be, unless you are ravaged with injuries or it's a blowout at the end of the game, there should never be 5 dudes on the floor that hadn't played together during the regular season. And so, yeah, I like that he's sort of fearless in a way.
And last thing, real quick, we'll wrap it up with this, Jason. But on the being aggressive and going for it, listen, we all know the Cavs and their current situation. They have the core 4 locked up. They now have DeAndre Hunter locked up for 2 more years as well. This is a window where the Cavs felt they could compete for an NBA championship. And I will never fault the team, basketball, baseball, football, for being aggressive and trying to upgrade in pursuit of a championship. We can get mad at a lot of things, Jason. Moves work, moves don't work, hires don't pan out. But the thought of being aggressive when you believe you have a chance to win it all, I'm never going to fault the team for going for it. I love the Donovan trade when they made it. I love the Hunter trade to go get a legit 3-and-D wing to help fill out this roster. And at the end of the day, from a coaching standpoint, knowing that despite your 41-9 record at the time, there was room for improvement, I think tells me and shows me that they're realistic with this. And they're all in it together. And sure, they didn't need to make a trade to be able to compete. But it takes some balls to mess with a 41-9 record and shake things up, especially with 2 guys that were as beloved in the locker room as those 2. And at the end of the day, DeAndre Hunter, in my opinion, puts them closer to winning a championship than they were currently with George and Karras. And I'm never going to fault the team for that. I just love the mentality of Cleveland saying, hey, let's go for it. Like, let's push our chips in, even though they already pushed their chips in. Like, let's put our last of our chips in and let's go for it. So it was refreshing to hear that kind of Kenny was on board with that as well, knowing what they had to give up, but also knowing they're right there and they could beat any team this season if the cards fall right.
This is a young team, but they're not as young. They've got some experience now and they've got some playoff experience. But what this trade signaled to the locker room is, okay, boys, it's time. Like, we're here. We've been driving and driving and driving for the last few years. We've reached the destination. The destination in this case is legitimate championship contention, not playoff. There's a difference.
Yeah.
There's a difference in playoff contender and championship contender. The Cavs have been a playoff contender. This was a signal from the organization to the locker room. We are now championship contenders. And I'm working on a story on this, and I don't want to get too deep into the numbers until I'm 100% certain that I'm right. But I hate the new CBA. We've talked about it on the show. I've written about it before. I can't believe the owners agreed to this deal. I know what they were trying to do. They were trying to prevent super teams from forming in glamorous markets. I get it. But what they've done is they have now punished small market teams who build through the draft, who develop on the margins, who make strategic trades at the right time. You're now punishing those teams, and they can't stay together as long as they could before. When you start your clock, there's very much an alarm on that now of when that clock ends. So the Cavs have about 3 to 4 years where it's time to go right now. And Kobe's talked in the past about there's a long runway here. We've got time on this. And he was right. Donovan's in year 3 now? But the clock is now ticking on this. Like it's where there's a starting line, there's also a finish line to this.
Yeah.
So the Cavs really have the next 3 Junes to win a championship before things get really complicated and really start hitting some pressure points here. But it's a great move to signal to the organization that we believe in you guys. We believe that this team is ready. And that's what you want. Like, this is a big opportunity for Kenny. I want to sit down and talk to him about this at some point here over the second half. He was rebuild guy in Brooklyn. He was JB.
Yeah.
And then he got fired before he got a chance to be championship guy. This is his first chance at winning a championship as well. This is his first time going through it. He didn't have championship caliber teams in Brooklyn. They fired him as soon as they got good players. So, I mean, he was obviously sitting next to Steve Kerr when the Warriors were going through it the last couple of years. But for him to be holding the clipboard and for him to be in charge and calling the timeouts and drawing up the plays, this is his first time too. So this is a tremendous signal from the organization that you guys are ready. We believe in this unit. And now we're going to press the start button on this and let's go.
Last point, we'll wrap here, Jason. The Cavs could have waited until the offseason to make a move like this. They were under no pressure to make this move right now. They could have waited. But we just talked about the contract situation. Hunter here for 2 more years. We know Mitchell has the 2 years after this. This gives them a third shot at a playoff run with this core 5 now. This starting group or closing group, however you want to phrase it, with the core 4 plus Hunter. You have 3 playoff runs, basically guaranteed, barring any changes, with everyone locked in to go get it. And we talked about the financial constraints, especially with Boston moving forward. And they're going to be a second apron team. And then the repeater comes in, so they're going to have to shed some salary. This gives them their first runway at playoff experience as a unit. And maybe they don't win it this year. Maybe they do. But they have that experience next season that they can build off of. And then in 2 seasons, it just pushes the clock forward. And the price of doing business to get a DeAndre Hunter, if it's Niang, if it's LeVert, some swaps and some seconds, you got to give something to get something, Jason. And I applaud the front office, the coaching staff, and the team for kind of knowing this gets us closer to a championship. If this is what we have to do, let's do it.
Yeah, you mentioned something real quick. And then you can wrap us up and get us out of here. The timing was perfect on this, and we've talked about this on the show. But LeVert was expiring. If you're going to turn that into something because of where they're going with the cap and aprons and everything else, this was really their last chance to turn LeVert into something. And they were able to get 2 more years out of DeAndre with it. That's a win. The Cavs are at the beginning of their window. I feel like Boston is more toward the end of their window. But do not make the mistake of telling – I was having a conversation with Donovan last night. I don't think he'd be upset with me sharing this, that I said, you may just have to wait out Boston this year. And he said, like, let's put it this way. There is a sense of urgency with him to win right now. There is no waiting.
There should be.
There is, and he said, like, there's no guarantee that next year we're in this spot, that we're playing this well. And has this team arrived a year early? Yeah, they have. I think they surprised themselves. I think the players surprised themselves. I think they surprised the front office. I think they surprised the coaching staff with how quickly this thing fell into place this year. And so, yeah, they might be early, but don't mistake that for them thinking that they have a lot of time.
Yeah,
because they very much feel like they need to capitalize on this right now, and they need to go right now and win it, even this year. So it's fun, man. They've done a really nice job of putting this thing back together, building this thing back up, pressing the right buttons, and it's time to go.